evaporative coolers, also known as swamp coolers. There's basically two main types. You have portable units and you have stationary units. They come in different CFM ratings, different power ratings, depending on the size of the space that you're trying to cool. And there's a formula to figure out what size swamp cooler you need for your building or the area in your building that you're trying to cool. Basically, it takes into account the square footage of the area you're trying to cool and the height from the floor to the ceiling. A lot of these evaporative cooler manufacturers on their website will have a chart or a formula you can use to plug in your numbers to make sure you're purchasing the correct size evaporative cooler. There's basically down discharge and side discharge evaporative coolers. So down discharge, as the name implies, the output blows straight down. On a side discharge, the output blows out the side. So down discharge would work really well for being mounted on your roof, especially if you have a flat roof, but roof doesn't have to be flat. Side discharge would be great for mounting outside your building where you want the air to blow in the side of your building through your wall. There's also direct versus indirect evaporative coolers. So a direct evaporative cooler, a blower forces air through a permeable and water-soaked pad. On the other hand, an indirect type evaporative cooler carries a secondary heat exchanger that prevents humidity levels from being increased in the airstream that enters the building. There's basically two main pad types, flexible fiber pads and rigid pads. That's sort of a honeycomb structure. The fiber pads are less expensive, lighter, made from synthetic material, as you see on the bottom left corner of the screen. Aspen material, that's the center pad. The lifespan of these pads depends greatly on the hardness of the water. Once you start to see that white calcium mineral buildup on the surface of the pads, they need to be replaced. Because as the pads collect the hard water minerals, it greatly reduces their efficiency of your evaporative cooler. Rigid pads, on the other hand, they're more expensive, but they last longer. And some of those can even be rinsed off and reused. Again, water hardness plays a big factor here, how long they last. And they come in different thicknesses too, and different lengths and widths. So this is an example of some maintenance items that need to be performed on an evaporative cooler. This is an Essex Air Champion 5000 DD, which stands for downdraft. It's their parts breakdown list. So you want to check your belt tension and condition. Is the belt cracked, brittle, worn out? It's a good idea to have some common wear item parts on hand, spare parts like belts, water pumps, pads, spare float valves. The float valve, for those folks that don't know, is where the water enters the unit, and when the float drifts down, the valve turns on and fills up the pan with water. When the float drifts up, it shuts the water off. You may have, depending on what type of motor you have, you may have grease fittings on the motor that need to be greased. You also want to make sure you grease the grease fittings on the pillow bearing blocks. That's important. And again, make sure you replace your pads regularly as needed. And have a spare water pump on hand. And when the unit is running, you want to check the water flow, make sure none of the tubing is clogged, make sure the pump is pumping water through the tubing and the water is trickling down properly through all of your pads. And then inspect the general overall condition of the unit. Check for cracked or broken welds, loose, broken, missing fasteners. Check the wiring, etc. Make sure the blower wheel, spins easily, smoothly. It's not wobbling or vibrating badly. Make sure there's no odd or strange noises with the motor. Make sure nothing's rubbing or have come loose. Just sort of common sense visual inspection. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Leave me a comment for future video topics you would like me to cover.